That was Kendra Davenport from Fallen Patriots. What a fantastic charity. I'm really glad that she was able to join us. You are listening to Stribling's New York on WOR AM 710 on your digital dial and iHeart Media Company. We have another fantastic guest, another Renaissance person. Burton Rocks is a best-selling author. He's an attorney. What else have you? Burton's on the phone. You also are a top-flight sports agent and conquering new heights every day. Welcome, Burton Rocks.
Rob, thank you so much for having me.
So we're going to talk a little bit about Major League Baseball now. We had Christian Winfield on, who's a Knicks reporter earlier, and as baseball season is starting to take off, basketball is winding down. So tell us about what's going on in Major League Baseball.
Well, the most interesting part for me as an agent is always where prospects are sorting out in Major League Baseball. You know, the guys that get to the majors and the guys in the minors that are on the cusp of a Major League career. But I think fans find the draft to be probably the most interesting process. And, you know, June 9th, we'll have another year of the Major League Baseball player draft, where they're going to take the best college and high school talent in the country. And, you know, as a from an advisor's perspective, because you're an advisor to these kids, you're not an agent until they're a professional. From an advisor's perspective, the draft is probably unlike anything else in sports with baseball, because baseball has a minor league system, and baseball has so many different layers to it that people think, well, you just have to be a top draft pick and you'll go to the pros, which is the case a lot of times. But then there are other cases where guys go to the Arizona Fall League as a top prospect, and they weren't drafted high, sometimes not even at all. So I have players that fall into all three categories, and I think for a fan, that's a pretty interesting realm to speak about, where, hey, where did my favorite player come from? What was the road to get there?
Well, you know, if you compare, because I've covered a lot of basketball, there are probably 450 NBA players. How many Major League Baseball players are there if you count everything, and the minors included? There's got to be quite a bit of them.
Well, there's 800 guys, you know, and the 40-man roster guys. So your 40-man roster players times 30 teams, you're talking about 1,200 people on the 40-man. And then there are all these prospects, and some of them aren't on a 40-man, and yet they're just a hair's breadth away from the majors, and they're in the top 30 prospects in their organization, because every organization can't put all of their top 30 prospects on a 40-man. So the dynamic there is a constantly changing. It's a very fluid dynamic, and the players feel it. The players feel the pressure to succeed, and the players feel the pressure that each year that goes by is a year that they're losing ground, because you get another crop of talent coming in.
So how do you stay informed? Do you have relationships with scouts?
I have relationships with the owners and general managers and the trickle-down effect to scouting directors. And, you know, you basically know from the management perspective where they feel a player is going. It's interesting when you contrast it to a media perspective. You'll see lists and prospect lists that are done through the MLB pipeline, and you'll see that chart, and you'll see how it plays into the thinking on the executive side of things. And sometimes it's corollary, and sometimes the paths are divergent. And it's interesting to hear how, even at the amateur level, how Baseball America charts players and how an organization will chart the players. And again, sometimes they are both right, you know, they're converging at a central point, and sometimes they are tangential to one or the other.
We know what's kind of funny is we've had two popular movies the last few years. One was Moneyball, and the other is Trouble with the Curve, and they each take a completely opposite perspective. But I think there's truth to both sides of those stories.
Absolutely. And Rob, you know as well that the analytics has become huge in baseball and in professional sports in general. And I think that the next wave will be science. I mean, there are teams that are already talking about having science divisions, employing people in the science world. It's interesting. I mean, I've lived it as a kid with my father as a well-known chemist, but about sports from a science point. But teams are now understanding that they can better grasp the value of their product and better convey that value to fans through science than they can ignoring science.
Well, whatever works when you're in businesses that generate so much revenue, as long as it's not voodoo, I think it's worth trying. I don't know, maybe you could get there's some players I'd like to stick a pin in a doll version of them. Basketball teams for at least the last 20 years, if not more, have been traveling on the road with psychiatrists for the players. So they have somebody to talk to and when they're dealing with the vagaries of their job.
Well, and from that perspective, I think baseball, in my field, baseball general managers and owners understand that it's not always going to be the clear-cut road to the top for a player. Sometimes it will be. Sometimes, and I've discussed this with teams because they've been interested in the analytic I created, my QI sheet, and wondering how I evaluate talent, how they will evaluate talent. They've picked my brain on it, and I've had this discussion with owners.
Well, I'll tell you what, I am interested in your QI sheet, and we have time for the short hit today, but how about if you come on next week's show and we take a little longer and you go through the whole QI philosophy that you've put together?
Sounds good to me.
All right. So then that's a date. Thanks for joining us. I'm sorry our time was less limited, or more limited rather than I had expected, but that way you can come on again next week and we can chat further.
Sounds great to me, Rob. Thanks so much.
My pleasure. Thanks for joining us.
Bye.